Faisal, welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you, and I don't know where to start. You've done so much in such a short period of time, relatively speaking. And I'd love to know, though. I know you came from really humble beginnings. I know you were a janitor in college. What can you walk me through your backstory? Like, what did that look like?
Sure, sure. Look, I grew up in a middle class family in Bangladesh when I was in high school, and my father was a civil engineer, mom was a homemaker. Despite their wishes, I came to US to study. They wanted me to study back home, go to my father's engineering school, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to study computer science. So I had to kind of like fetch for myself. And when I ended up coming here, I came here with almost nothing, bare bone scholarship. So my first job in college was a graveyard shift janitorial engineer, as they say. So that's how my life started. And as I progressed through school, kind of managed to survive on a bare minimum basis. I ended up developing a product in my fourth year of or fifth year of my college, and as a result of that product, the software product, in early '90s, I managed to get 6, 7 job offers. Unlike sending a resume, I sent out this floppy disk, and as a result, I got 6, 7 job offers. So that's how kind of my journey started. And I mean, if you just listen to that story, there is like a entrepreneurial DNA that runs in my vein.
Well, that's what I
That
wanted
kind
to
of started very, yeah.
That's where I wanted to dive in. Where did that come from? Because I'm guessing you weren't like a normal kid wanting, I mean, or were you? I mean, it seems unusual to leave Bangladesh at that age. Were any of your friends doing that? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, so I mean, um, see, I went to an American missionary school called St. Joseph, and as it turns out, that from that particular school, a lot of kids do go overseas because St. Joseph was run by American missionary fathers, and we got exposed to a lot of American culture, including there used to be a thing back then called U.S. Information Center that that provided a lot of cultural facts about U.S. and we get to go there and listen to jazz, and we had enormous access of what school offers what and how to take TOEFL exam as a English as a second language, how to prepare for SAT and enter college. So many of my friends, believe it or not, did end up coming to US or Canada or UK or that sort of places from that particular school. But the what may be slightly different in my case is that I kind of decided that I wanted to do off my own, which was kind of a ludicrous because at the age of 19, 20, leaving your homeland and coming to a foreign culture. And remember those days, this is not like now where everything is connected. You have internet, you search, you have same food profile. I mean, none of that, right?
Sure.
I mean, we're compared to now and then, we're talking about dark ages in many ways, right? So, but unknown kind of played a role in having that naive optimism and kind of ignoring what could possibly go wrong. But it is that desire to survive and ultimately thrive, and that entrepreneurial vein that kind of got me where how I came here and put myself to school and then follow on my career.
And you were like the literal example of like the American dream in a way, right? I mean, because at an early age, it wasn't like you just wanted to come over here and be an engineer. You wanted to come over here, it sounds like, from a very early age and start something on your own or create something. Was that what was in your head at that time?
Um, it's a little bit of both. What was driving me during those days was that this desire to make it here. And
Mm-hmm.
definition of making it is that I'm going to have a professional career, and I'm gonna have a decent living and whatnot, right? But I always had that entrepreneurial backdrop behind the scene, whereas I got to build my own thing or create my. I mean, I've repeatedly built a new product or technology, and even later on when I've gotten into writing, I looked at each of my books as a product. So I have this product and creation notion. So the entrepreneurial element of it kicked in, I would say, after my second job, where I learned a few things how the U.S. corporation or global corporation runs. I was very fortunate to be hired by Pitney Bowes and then follow on by Dun and Bradstreet. So I got that hands-on, that quote unquote business acumen and leadership training at those, corporations. And then the natural element of being, I want to build something and solve problem. A combination of that gave me that confidence of being an entrepreneur. And since then, I've been nothing but an entrepreneur. I don't
Sure.
think I have worked for anybody for, I don't know, the last 30 years since my days of Dun and Bradstreet.
What was that first venture out on your own after you left Dun and Bradstreet?
So this was a software product company that focused on middleware. During that days, we used to, the desktop products just, the desktop concept of desktop just, emerged, and mostly computing was done on mainframe or VAX or whatever. So the product I developed was a kind of a store and forward infrastructure messaging environment that would take the data from the legacy environment and dump it on your desktop, and you could kind of do these rudimentary analytics those days, right? So that was a hot demand because I mean, whether you're a trader or whether you are you're doing analysis, you needed access from a different environment and bring in your local area network, as they used to call it.
Right.
So this product kind of facilitated that, and I managed to get Chase Manhattan Bank as my customer because they would do a lot of these high volume transaction processing, and they needed to create a queue where the transaction would sit in a queue, and some human would go in there and look at the queue and make sure those transactions were quote unquote kosher and not fraudulent, and they're not they're the right transaction. So that was the product, and and what was interesting is that in the process of developing that, this is where I got my hands-on experience on the backbone of internet, because it was run on TCP/IP, which is really the backbone of internet. And browser was kind of like, people were toying with coming up with this idea of browser, and so I started, I looked into raising money, and in my backyard, this was all in Connecticut, by the way. Back in my backyard, I had GE Capital. I went to GE Capital to raise money, and they said, "Look, we don't, how about you come and work for us, and we'll bring your product, and we'll set you up with the venture." So that's
Sure.
what I ended up doing. So I kicked off the first with my team and some senior executive from GE. We kicked off the first internet B2B commerce venture on behalf of GE. So I did that for 3, 4 years, and then started my next company and the next company and the
That's
next company.
another, geez, another great company to get some foundational,
Yes.
leadership training from as well. I wanted to ask you, so as you're going along this journey, you knew you had a gift for innovation. I think, you knew you had a gift
Yeah.
for creation and technology. What about all the other aspects of business though, like, leadership and the finance end? And did that stuff come natural to you, or did you have some bumps in the road there?
No, it did come. Some of it came naturally. Some of the maturity, and we're talking about, I'm at that ripe age of like 20 something, right?
Yeah.
So mid 20s, late 20s. The people skill element of it, the understanding the human dynamics and organizational dynamics, and how to influence those type of skill set. I wouldn't say I had it. I had a natural ability to take complex problem and coming up with product and explaining to people how it could solve their problem. But the natural element of the maturity level of being a true leader, it was hardly there. That started to get from the working. I was very lucky to have those kind of large organization, and as it happens that all my venture kind of focused on solving problems for large organizations because that's where my kind of the foundational element comes from, right? So that I had to learn. Technology came naturally, but these human element of it, I had to learn. And as time went by, I made quite a bit of mistakes in quote unquote what would we call the leadership and management mistakes because right after GE, I went started my next company with seed funding from Gartner Group, who also happens to be in Connecticut, and we had Netscape as my technology partner, and we kicked it out, and it was immediate success, and we got customer like GE, obviously, but Mastercard and Amex, and I really didn't need to raise money, but I ended up like raising like $30+ million, and this is where my trouble began
Yeah.
because I didn't understand the complexity of managing politics of diverse stakeholders and their diverse, interest and their motivational factor, how they take then what really made sense for each one of those stakeholders, right? So
Right.
I made a blunder, and as a result, in blunder in the sense blunder of managing them, not in blunder in terms of my strategy and execution. And I got fired from my own company. It's like kind of like a classic Steve Jobs kind of a story, although I'm nowhere near as successful or accomplished as Steve Jobs was. But it's kind of a similar story where the board took over, and I ended up with nothing. But unfortunately, they ran my company to the ground within 18 months because they lost the vision, and they lost the this X factor that a lot of founders has with the hourly customer because they are the best mouthpiece for their product for their to their customer and solving their customer problems, right? But this was a great lesson for me, and it completely shifted my head. And this is where actually right after that I started writing a lot about business model and technology model and leadership. And as I started my next company and took a very different approach of how to scale it without getting any traditional funding and bootstrapping it, but also how I lead and what really matters to me as a person and what's my true calling, as I define now. I'm now very much of an impact driven entrepreneur and a very much of an impact driven leader. And I know it's an overused word, but nevertheless, I don't do anything these days because because that this will propel my business to the next level or it will get me next level of revenue. Yes, obviously revenue and profit. Without that, there's no business can survive or succeed. But my motivational factor has changed completely in terms of why I do what I do.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, you're really leading towards the greater vision and then maybe
Yeah.
managing on
Yeah.
the short term because there's still cash flow, there's still
Yes.
expectations.
Yes.
When you had those mishaps with that board and with your investors back then, did it have a lot to do with, they had different expectations? Like maybe some of them were only in it to make a short-term profit. Maybe some of them were in it for, and you didn't know that necessarily going in. And
Yeah.
so you're managing whatever, 10 different personalities that have 10
That,
different opinions on where things should go.
Absolutely. So because remember, this is like we're talking about 1992, sorry, 1996 time frame, right?
Right.
Internet bubble is about to happen. The idea of venture funding was that you get funding, you crank it up with fluff and whatever, and then you go IPO and you make a pile of dough, and that's kind of how those investor exit, and it goes on from there. In my case, I was a B2B company, and we are very much focused on very large, stable brands like G's, and MasterCard and Amex and those sort of a thing. So my vision was, it was only a 2-year-old company. I wanted to kind of hone in our solution and have predictable revenue and come up with the next set of offering before we try to grow too fast. And that this is where it kind of digressed. And and furthermore, I wasn't savvy. I'm in my 50s, so obviously I learned a lot along the way.
Sure.
Managing the board and managing customer and your organization, that's a skill set by in itself. And it requires a lot of influencing, not necessarily, I mean, you could disagree, but there's a finesse that you learn by understanding human and organizational psychology. I didn't have that at that time, right? So I lost the battle, but the net result, my vision survived, meaning my vision was right vision, but the company died, right? So net impact is the same. So it needed a little more time. It needed a little more maturity, just like I predicted at that time, but during those days, that was kind of a common story, and it's still a common story. Like we see the huge bubble of unicorns and chasing unicorns, and a lot of them turned out to be absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And there's quite frankly, quite criminal, right? I mean, so we've seen that too. So that's where when you talk about impact-driven leadership, I mean that's where a lot of those North Star and ethical mindset and empathy and the socially conscious leaderships comes in play. So if you look at if we look at my last, like 10 years of work, I mean, last 6 years I spent a great deal of time and energy trying to work with our federal government, which is driven by me trying to give back to the country that I call country, my country, right? So I work heavily with DoD, I work heavily with DHS, because I believe in our national security, I believe in our citizens' right and doing good for our citizen, and as a result, make an impact globally, right? So that's kind of been my recent calling, and then I've set up a nonprofit. So all my proceeds from my books and writing goes to the nonprofit. I have a cancer surviving son, so the proceed of the book goes to cancer research. So these type of things, completely changed, and things I talk about and write about are also very different than my very first book, where I was, analyzing like a typical business analyst or a business, junkie, what works and what doesn't work from a
Sure.
business model point of view, right? So if you read some of my recent work, like if you read what I wrote in Lift or Everything Connects or Reinvent, I kind of like a balance between the technological changes and geopolitical change, but also with mindset and resiliency and mindful leadership practices that are driven by empathy and influence and understanding what ticks you and then how you can add value, more so than how fast can you grow your company, right? That comes naturally if you get those things right, by the way.
Do you feel that, I mean, because you're so in this day to day, do you feel that it would seem to me that technology, for all that it's all where am I going with this question? I'm trying to think of like different governments and different societies that have been
Sure.
both lifted up and severely disrupted at the same time through technology, right? If you look what's, even Facebook and social outrest and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that long term, I mean, is technology going to be the great equalizer for, a world economy, and are we realistic in our timelines? Like what's it going to take? And I guess that's a big question, but I feel that that's where all these dictatorship type governments are getting challenged, right? Is because there's the
Yeah.
ability now to have a voice where maybe there wasn't one before.
Yeah, look, I mean, so you can argue both ways, right? I mean, all you have to look what has happened in last 10, 6, 3, and now, right? So if you look
Hmm.
at from that point of view, I mean, look, I mean, obviously, internet was kind of like the connector, which created this connected global, geopolitical system, right? And then we saw this advent of social media, which gave anybody and everybody a voice. And now you can argue, did that really give the voice? Initially, it did because everybody has a voice. But now, what we got into is that it also being used as a weapon and mechanism for all kind of destructive behavior by government, nefarious characters, bad actors, you name it, terrorists, you name it. I mean, it's being used for. Not only that, criminals, of all kind are using technology to really put the society on its head. There's a lot of conversation and debate about digital currency as well, right? Because
Hmm.
if the digital currency is not traceable, that gives you a vehicle to create even more of these kind of destructive behavior. So that's where we are. That's where we were actually 2 years ago. And now, if you look at what has happened in the last 2 years with like rapid growth of AI, it's going to get even worse because things are a lot faster. I mean, AI, as much as we think that artificial intelligence, it's not really intelligence yet, in the sense that we're really generating intelligence by tapping into a large database with the power of computing, and
Sure.
and that gives us faster answer, and it gives us predictable models, right?
Right.
So, but what it does, it allowing us to create a lot of fake information, right? So when you talk about geopolitics and you talk about equalizer of society, I don't know whether it's going to be equalizer or a destructor. That will depend on what we as a global society do over the next 3 to 5 years. I'm actually missed of working on a book called that kind of focus on exactly this topic, because there's great opportunity, which is, and there's a great destruction, right? So it's a what we do as a society in terms of balancing that. That's where the opportunity and the threat comes in. So opportunities such as, because of my own personal reason, I'm very much interested in healthcare, utilization of AI in healthcare, doing predictive modeling and doing better treatment, like especially in the case of cancer. If you can make a very patient-specific treatment, then the survival rate and the quality of life is a lot better than tweaking this medication, that medication, and we don't have enough data, right? So in those cases, AI will make a tremendous impact, right? But then you can look at since you brought up the political unrest and dictatorship and this and that. I mean, you can also look at how much distraction we could create as a society utilizing AI. When it comes to election or when it comes to forming public opinion, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Right.
And then you take it one step farther, since I am involved with defense. I mean, AI could have like devastating impact on humanity if we start using AI for war, an offensive war, without really controlling it and applying our moral, ethical element that only human can do, not some machine can do. Right. So there's a lot of things to think about, over the next 2 3 years, and that applies, by the way, to anybody. It's
Yeah.
not just handful of leaders, because AI at the end of the day, it's a collective manifestation of human society, right? So whatever our collective behavior is, that's what AI is going to learn from, right?
Sure.
So what we call norm, that's what AI will predict as the norm. So maybe the norm we are building shouldn't be the norm.
Yeah.
We should, but that's where it gets very interesting.
Well, it's like it's as you were talking about that, I'm like, it's a really powerful tool, AI technology in general. And
Right.
yes, it will help the disenfranchised could help the disenfranchised to get franchised, but it can also help the guy that's trying to steal the money out of your bank account do it
Yeah,
easier, right? Or it can also
absolutely.
help the person
Absolutely.
who wants to cause a riot to, put out false information or whatever, right? So
Yeah,
it's
sure.
powerful in whoever's hands it's in. For that reason, do you think we need more regulation around this stuff, or what are your thoughts?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, and there's a multi-level of governance that has to have to happen, right? One is like, the governance from collective, the global governmental standards, right? So, I mean, you've already seen there's the European standard body by bringing bunch of, the top leading countries together and trying to create a governance model. There is also a governance model for AI that's being developed by law schools and national information. There's an organization called NIST that's the security standard body for cybersecurity. They're all coming together to put together that kind of governance level. There's also a second level. There's a next level of governance where the companies who are building these technology or utilizing technology, they will have to apply the ethical governance model and have to decide how far is too far, right?
Right.
And there's a third level of governance, which is individuals, right? So, for example, I mean, there's all kind of nonstop debate about gun control and gun rights, right? So yeah, we have, especially in the U.S., I mean, we have gun control, but we also have Second Amendment right, but not everybody goes take their gun and start shooting people,
Right.
right? So same with AI. Just because you know how to use it doesn't mean you have to be a distractor. I mean, that's where individual moral, ethical, and governance model comes in, and we'll have to develop new set of law when people do break those kind of law. There has to be a pretty severe punishment. So I don't think that legal system or policymakers has caught up with the fast advancement of AI's rapid growth, and we're just on the cusp of it, right? So I think we're going to go through quite a bit of learning curve till we get that right, and I hope and pray that we will.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll have a very messed up society.
Well, and it's moving so fast. It's a
Right,
chase,
hard
and
to
we're
keep up.
losing. Right?
Yeah.
It's like they're running
Mhm.
after it, even if, or maybe they're not. But even if they started today, they'd be chasing, right?
Yeah.
And they'd be
Yeah.
continuing to chase because the pace of innovation is so quick. But you seem to me, in what reading what you've written, listening to you on podcast, you strike me as a very optimistic person in general, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I am because look, I mean, I mean, it's hard to predict, where we'll end up. But I mean, but if you look at history, I mean, historically, human society only moved forward even with a lot of civilization fall.
Hmm.
And if you look at the civilization that has fallen, what has happened with those civilizations is that they lost focus. They were heavily into, distracting their citizen in term all sorts of entertainment and non-productive activities, and handful of people trying to take over the control of the society, right? And that's when, if you look at Roman Empire, that's
Yeah.
how Roman Empire died, right? So are we going to see that kind of fallen empire? Probably will, because that's kind of like what history tells us. I mean, Mughal Empire, Roman Empire, all of them came and gone, and a new set of society got birthed. I mean, even this beautiful country of ours, which we call U.S., is a experimentation that grew up out of a very difficult time, and we risen to a top, and now we're having all kind of issues. Doesn't matter what your political belief is,
Sure.
whether it's left or right, right? So we're probably going to go through that kind of correction, if I can use that term, right? But I think that opportunity for us to do good and to make a difference could be tremendous because technology does have that capability. So my optimism comes from that point of view. That look, 7 years ago, if my son was sick, he wouldn't be alive, but now he is because he got sick 3 years ago, and the advancement of technological remedies are a lot higher, right?
Hmm.
So we're living longer. We have better, for the most part, at least those of us who are more fortunate than others, have a better, better living standard than we used to have, right? So a lot of these, I mean, we're connected, right? So if we want to do good, we have a lot more opportunity to do good, right? If we want to do bad, we also have a lot of opportunity to do bad. So this is where your, the inner moral compass. It's just not a like a religious thing. It's like a what do you want to do? It's like a love of humanity that could actually help us to take us farther than where we are today.
When was that shift for you? Because I know you mentioned early on it was kind of I want to build something. I want to be entrepreneurial. Your first book was around that type of thing, and then there was a shift at some point where I feel like you became again very outcome driven, very contribution driven. Was there one
Yeah.
moment that happened, or was it the getting fired from your own company? Was that the catalyst?
No, actually, getting fired from my own company was not the catalyst. Actually, getting fired from my own company was a business catalyst that allowed me to think how to grow things and build things different
Mm-hmm.
from a business point of view,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I did all my businesses after that are very different than your traditional. Okay, you come up with a product, you get customer, you get funding, and you get scale. That wasn't the case. I did everything after that with customer partnership. I would come up with a concept, team up with the customer, build something, and then commercialize it, right? So that was that shift, and my leadership shift in the context of commercial leadership, meaning a business leadership, changed at that time. But then what happened is that in my late 30s, and early 40s, I started to go back to my Eastern philosophical roots because I come from Bangladesh. I used to read a lot of Sanskrit driven literature and Bengali literature that tied to Buddhism and Hinduism and Sufism and that sort of a thing. I happened to have a board member who was a Japanese gentleman who passed away a few years ago. Was Toshiba's Toshiba US's chairman and CEO. He took me to this really kind of like a awakening and spiritual journey to in Kyoto and a couple other places in Japan where I spent some time in monastery. These all had a transformational, psychological transformational shift, and I kind of went back to my roots in terms of like very fundamental question. I think almost all of us ask at some point, like who am I? Who am I? And what am I doing? Whatever am I doing? Does it have any meaning? And I got to do something that's little more than myself.
Yeah.
And so it started shifting there, and then I sat and wrote this book called Everything Connects. And the fundamental message, this was almost like 10 years ago, was that if you don't know how to connect with yourself by figuring out who you are, it is very difficult to come up with a authentic value that you want to contribute to the society. And it is only if you know yourself, then you can understand what that is and understand the people better with this connected lens. And only then you can create a value that may survive above and beyond you. Right. So it's kind of that message that went into Everything Connects. And this was my fundamental shift. And this is what
Yeah.
also transformed me to say, okay, I got so much from this country that I call my country. I want to do something for it. I'm going to dedicate however form I can to make wherever I can. So I picked up the most complex area you can think of, like duty and that sort of area, which is it's complicated, it's controversial, all those elements. It has geopolitical, implication. It has leadership implication. But I love it because I learn and I have a chance to contribute.
Yeah.
And then when my son got diagnosed, that kind of propelled me to kind of pick up the pen again and start documenting some of my recent learning, and then set up this another organization called Next Chapter, which I'm trying to grow as a nonprofit to contribute to the Cancer Society. And then AI hit. So I'm obviously playing with the actual technology to build a couple of product, but also the ramification of it. So I'm middle of writing a manuscript right now that kind of focus on what's next for humanity. It's not so much about AI, but it's how do we unlock the human potential with utilization of technology such as AI, and how do we create that balance, that has huge potential, but we also have to, establish that governance model that doesn't destroy us, right? That balance optimistic. So I'm a pragmatic optimist. I mean, I'm
Right.
very pragmatic, but I'm an optimist, but I'm a pragmatic optimist. I don't have like a rose color optimism.
Yeah, it's not all
All will be
sunshines
okay.
and rainbows and
No,
unicorns,
no,
but it's practical. But yeah,
sure.
I get it. It seems like the last 10 or 12 years then since you made that. Do you feel is life more fulfilling for you since you made that shift? Because we see tons of really successful
Yes,
people that have not
yes,
figured that out all the way into their 60s or 70s, right? And
yeah,
they're like, I made all this
yeah,
money, I built this big company, and I
right,
feel like crap, and they don't know why, right? Because life was supposed to
right,
be good when they hit this milestone, right? Was that the secret
yeah,
sauce for you?
yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I have like this enormous energy now, that's not driven by, okay, well, what's the next quarter's revenue? It's like,
Right,
what can I do that would be make a difference, with the people I work with and things I'm doing. And I do a lot of things, but I'm also much more productive because it's not work for me.
right,
It comes naturally, and I feel inspired to do this stuff, if you want to use that word fulfill, yes, I do feel fulfilled, despite the nonstop adversity that any of us face, right? I mean, I don't think, everybody has issues, right? I mean, dealing with your only child, when he gets diagnosed with cancer, isn't something that you plan for, right? But we're doing okay. I mean, he's
right,
21 years old, putting himself to school. We're okay. But I bring the what I'm doing and what I get from the world as an energy to live through this, right? So
yeah,
so it's a I can't explain this. There's no. It's if you the more you give, it actually energizes you to do more. And but more you give, it's not working harder so that you can make your next million. I mean, that's
right,
not gonna. At least it didn't fulfill me. I mean,
right.
I'm not wired that way.
Well, I mean, I think we're wired when we get to the core of who we are. We are wired to, I
Hmm.
think, do more for others than we will for ourselves. And I think, to your point, I mean, it's why you've taken on cancer as a project, right? Not that you wouldn't have
Sure.
otherwise, but
Yes.
and there's tremendous motivation in that, not just to help your son, but
Yes. Of
of all
course.
the other people now that you've had,
Mhm.
personal contact with it. So
Yeah.
tell me, as we start to close up here, so what's your focus right now? Like what you got a lot of different focuses, I guess, but when you wake up week to week, like what's your outcome
So
now?
I have like the 3 or 4 tentacles that I'm always like dabbling, right? So one focus is because I'm very much in innovation, leadership, management space as a broader context, and I am a technology developer. I am constantly developing new products that kind of helps. Teams and the leaders to do more with better decision making and better collaboration and better utilization of technology. So that's one vein. Obviously, helping our government any way I can. Aside from wearing a uniform, that's another factor for me these days, right? So, and the third factor is that I will use my platform and writing and my own research to see how technology can help with healthcare and more particularly in cancer space for obvious reason, right? So these are kind of like my 3 things, and I'm constantly learning, from all kind of people. I
Yeah.
mean, not necessarily technology people, but all kind of people.
Well, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. As for as much as you've accomplished, you've still got a very I don't know, you just come across as a still very curious person, a person that's still very much growing and learning and giving back. And I think that's really, really cool. And thanks for taking a few minutes to talk with us today.
No, listen, I mean, the curiosity is kind of like what it is, Ken. I mean, without being curious, you can't, I mean, you cannot grow, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the learning is something very interesting because the more you learn, the more you know how little you know.
Yeah.
It gives you humility, but it also allows you to strive for something, right? The mother, the genesis of creativity and innovation is learning, and every innovator does exactly that. So, and I'm very fortunate, and thanks for having me, and thanks for what you do because you're bringing awareness through all kind of people, and there's a value to it. So I commend you for doing what you do.
Well, thank you so much. It's so great to meet you finally, and hopefully our paths cross again soon.
Absolutely good. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Take care.